So I was perusing the internet to kind of keep a pulse on the labor market, as I often do. I came across an article that I thought was really interesting. The headline here says nearly 4 in 10 employers avoids hiring recent college grads in favor of older workers. And obviously it caught my attention because I feel like it's kind of surprising. When you look at the pulse of the workplace, especially for people who are older and they're kind of further along in their career, the underwriting theme is that they feel that a lot of these jobs they're not qualifying for because a recent college grad or somebody that's early in their career is going to be the cheaper option, and companies will often lay off people who are more expensive, who they feel like maybe they can replace their skill set more easily with a recent college grad. And so seeing this article where it says the exact opposite is kind of an eye-opener. Now, when you talk to a college graduate, they'll also experience the same frustration, saying, well, I can't get a job. It's like in this, the vicious cycle, the wheel. You can't get a job because you don't have experience, but you can't get experience because you don't have a job. And it's kind of this cyclical thing. And so being a recent college grad is one of the hardest jobs to get, that first job, because you have to convince an employer that you have the skill set to do so. And then, again, for the older worker, they kind of are experiencing the exact opposite, where you could kind of age yourself out. Especially for an older worker, you'll often find if you don't keep pace with the skill set, your wages there's a point of diminishing returns where you will hit a certain there's a certain point in your career where you'll no longer be able to continue to move upward in salary bands, especially if you don't move into an entirely different job classification, like going into a leadership career path. So when I was reading through this article, there's some things that really kind of stood out to me. And one of the interesting things is how college grads, the younger generation, is perceived. And specifically, they're talking about in this article, the Gen Z college grads who are struggling to struggling to kind of incorporate themselves or integrate themselves into the professional world. I think that's where employers are feeling frustrated. So this company, there was a survey done by this company, and this is through intelligent.com. Basically what they're saying, and I'll kind of read through some of the highlights of it, is that older workers are being offered better pay, which is not surprising because they have more skills, just because they have demonstrated experience. They offer older workers better pay and increased benefits, but to avoid hiring Gen Z graduates, which I thought was really interesting. It said when asked if they avoid hiring college graduates for positions that they're eligible for in favor of older candidates, 39% of employers said that they do. These employers are willing to implement a variety of tactics to avoid working with recent college grads, including offering more benefits to attract older workers, paying higher salaries, and offering remote and hybrid work in order to hire more an older employer who's overqualified for a position instead of hiring somebody who's younger. Again, it's like this, that's where the disconnect seems to be for me, is that in my experience in looking at the people who are in the job market, they're not necessarily seeing that to be true. They're feeling like there's not a lot of companies willing to hire older people into more individual contributor or traditionally entry-level positions. But the numbers suggest the exact opposite, that actions, again, that employers are willing to take to trying to get around hiring these entry-level roles. And as we read further into it, some of the reasons that they give is 1 in 5 employers says when it comes to job interviews, they find that college graduates are wholly unprepared. And I would say that this is probably pretty true. And I don't necessarily think it's a generational thing, more so than I think that it's a college or a university thing, where they just don't give people the proper preparation to be successful entering into a career. There's very little in the way of preparation, interview prep, how to write an actually effective resume. Some of the resumes that I've seen from entry-level folks, and it's really pretty basic. And I don't think that these career service centers, as much as they try to help, like your job service center at the universities that you might attend, I think that they mean well, but I think that there is a disconnect. The people who are working in those centers typically do not hire people or have never been part of a corporate hiring process. In other words, they've never interviewed, they've never screened resumes, etc. And so they're not necessarily seeing it from the employer's perspective, and they're kind of given this generic baseline experience. And a lot of these college graduates that come into the workforce and present their resumes, there is a sense that they're unprepared for it. They're unprepared for how to market themselves effectively compared to their peer group, partially because they don't have the right experience, but I think it's also that they're not really sure how to market themselves. It's almost like this is the first time they've really experienced competition, because let's face it, job market is competition. You're competing against the person sitting next to you. And in some cases, you're competing against other people in your class for the same coveted jobs. And this is especially true for really coveted roles at major employers who might recruit your university. So they're saying that these employers are saying that they show up without being able to effectively present themselves. They struggle with eye contact during interviews. In fact, 55% say that. And I've probably experienced that myself, where when I talk to people who are earlier in their career or near entry level, there is a degree of struggle with how do you present yourselves, because you got to think that these hiring managers typically are talking to very experienced people at the same time as they're talking to the newer generations who are coming into the workforce. So they're kind of seeing both ends of it. And it is harder to convince an employer that you are the best fit for the job when you can't make good eye contact, when you can't present yourself in a clear and effective manner, that sort of thing. Second major thing that they're saying is that the entry-level generation is asking for an unreasonable compensation based on the level of skill that they're bringing in. And I do think that that's part of an expectation. Maybe it's a generational expectation where they're seeing a certain level of compensation being paid on the open market, and then maybe not being fully aware of how their skill truly matches up to it. I think the job market also has played a role in that, especially in 2021, where we had compensation skyrocketing because there was bidding wars for talent. We didn't have enough people. And so I think coming into the workplace expecting compensation of some equivalent to somebody who's maybe been working for 15 or 20 years, it is potentially a big disconnect with employers, and they're saying so. The inappropriate dress is also another thing. Now, this is probably going to be more dependent on the industry type. So if you go into a tech kind of background, maybe wearing less dressy stuff is probably okay. But going into an interview, you want to be dressed appropriately. It's kind of like this, it's like an emotional intelligence thing. It's like kind of knowing how to act or how to behave in the right settings at the right time. And then taking that a step further, they're also indicating that there's the use of inappropriate language. It's like almost like it's too casual. There's kind of you're a little too, like I've had people say to me in interviews like, "Hey, bro," and "boss" and things like that. And I admit it's a turnoff. When you hear that kind of language, it comes across as disrespectful. And I think that that's what it's kind of showing in this data here. And right in line with the inappropriate language, you also have employers who are reporting that there are a lot of up to 20, looks like 22% of people are refusing to turn on their camera during a virtual interview, which is a big no-no. If you're interviewing for a company and it's a virtual interview, it's absolutely an expectation to have your camera on. And if you refuse to turn it on in this virtual interview, you can really expect that you'll be certainly behind the eight ball. As far as your competition is concerned, they're all presenting themselves in this professional manner, and if you're just not even doing any of these things, I can see that being a case. Now, this last one is really interesting to me, and it's almost unbelievable because it just seems like it's like something you just read in these types of surveys. But 20% of employers have indicated or reported that an interviewer brought a parent to their interview, and I just can't even imagine a case where that would be acceptable to bring your parent to a job interview. And I'm going to be bluntly honest here. If somebody brought their parent to an interview with me, I would not move you on. That would be a big no-no. And I think that that's probably a pretty reasonable expectation. If you can't present yourself and market yourself without a parent being there to assist you, then you probably need to go back and learn some serious life skills, because they're not going to come into an office and sit next to you while you're working. And I've even heard anecdotally, and I've never experienced this myself, but I've heard that parents coming in and addressing managers after a performance appraisal or the person not getting the raise that they think they deserved. And, obviously that's a big problem for, in a professional work environment. You have to be able to hold your own in a professional setting. So really interesting survey results. I've probably experienced a couple of these in my recruiting days, but some of them I've never had somebody refuse to go on camera before in an interview. Certainly, I've never had somebody bring a parent to their interview before, but I have experienced the compensation issue, that's why it's so important to know what your value is and what your worth is, and being reasonable about it. Because we can assign ourselves what we think we're worth, but if the market just doesn't demand or support that, then you can ask for the moon. There's nothing wrong with that. You could ask for double the market value or market rate for your services, but you probably shouldn't expect too many job offers to come your way. So we got to be reasonable with our compensation, especially based on the amount of experience that we have and how directly related our skills are to the jobs. In addition to that, we also have 2 out of 3 employers saying that recent college grads can't manage their workload. And if you kind of break down the numbers here, you've got 60%, looks like 60% or 61% saying that they're late for work frequently. They hand in assignments late. They don't dress professionally. They deliver poor quality work, are late to meetings, use inappropriate language, I'm assuming in the workplace setting, and are difficult to manage and don't get along with their coworkers. So there's kind of a lot of maybe some office drama. Now, you can kind of see in the dark blue is very true, and then in the blue is somewhat true. So I mean, there's some pretty strong trends here in terms of what employers are saying about recent college grads when they actually get into the workplace. Now, they're also finding that recent college grads are entitled. 63% employers say that they have a sense of entitlement, that they get offended way too easily, that they're unprepared for the workplace, lack professionalism, don't respond well to feedback, have a work ethic issue. It seems like this is really piling on. So if you're a Gen Z and you're watching this is not, I'm just reporting the data, but of course, not everybody is like that, and generationally, not everybody is like that. It's a very broad generalization, but this is the data that is being shared with through the survey. But there's a motivation issue. There's more training costs. I'm assuming because they have less skill and poor communication skills, to lack technical skills. Which the technical skill, it's like, okay, you're going to learn that as you progress into your career. So that one might be maybe that one's not so fair, but nonetheless, that's what employers are saying. So I guess here's the methodology is that 800 U.S. managers, directors, and executives were surveyed in December of 2023. And so this is going to be for it looks like these are professional level jobs, and the people who were surveyed were C-suite executives, HR managers, directors, owners, senior management, middle management, etc. So as we take these survey data results and kind of extrapolate that into some more interesting data points, there's other articles now that say also Gen Z hates their corporate jobs, but it's maybe not quite that simple. Certainly, the 9-to-5 work schedule has been going viral, and well known that Gen Z is kind of pushing the envelope for moving away from a traditional 9-to-5. Which, hey, I think that we've been out of balance as a society, especially in the older generations, where work-life balance has been a real problem, especially in the oldest generations, where there's this kind of, it's like this, the oldest generations have this incessant need to work, to overwork, to really not have a great balance. And it's kind of pushed down. Like when I started into the workplace, most of the people the senior leaders were, all in the baby boomer generation. And there was definitely a strong sense of work ethic, and almost to the point of it not being healthy. And I remember I was very frustrated with some of my leaders, where I felt we were held to a standard that just wasn't healthy and realistic. And there was times where I honestly felt like I wasn't safe. Like I remember one time, it was snowing in where I was living. We had a blizzard, and it was like 2 or 3 feet of snow that were coming down, and it was like midday. The snow was coming in by 5 p.m. They were calling for, like, they were shutting down the roads. Like the Department of Transportation was shutting down all the roads. They were saying it's not safe to drive. And my boss was like, it's almost like you're in the foxhole, and he's saying, hold the line, and wasn't allowed to leave until I think it was like 4:30. They let us leave a half hour early. It took me about 3.5 hours to get home, and I was inching my way and white knuckling it the whole way down the road, thinking that I wasn't going to make it home. And it's this generational thing. So I do think that there's a disconnect, especially from a work-life balance perspective. And honestly, I think that that's a healthy perspective to bring into the workplace. Maybe they can help heal that side of things and get us to a more reasonable balance. What that balance is kind of remains to be seen, but certainly taking vacation time, not rolling it over. People have this need, and I've been guilty of this myself, feeling the need to roll over your vacation time so that you have a bank of it, you can save it for a rainy day. But all that does is that leads you to burnout. And I think that the idea of shortening the work week, I'm certainly in favor of that. In the United States, we lag the rest of the world in paid time off and disconnecting from our work. And I think that that's something that could really benefit us to have a healthier balance, or maybe more of a Gen Z based approach. At the same token, we also have Gen Z saying that they're more stressed about their savings than another age group. So it's a very interesting juxtaposition. There's a disconnect from the amount of work that they want to do and how engaged they are in the workplace, but then they're also stressed about their savings. So it's kind of like, are they mutually exclusive? You can't have one without the other. There has to be some sort of a balance between your work and your life, and how much you engage with this side of your life. And there's a direct correlation there. If you don't work hard, you're probably not going to have much to show for it, and vice versa. So it's a very interesting kind of there's two sides to this coin here.